Good morning, and welcome to the High Impact Technology Solutions Seminar. My name is Mike Humphreys, and on behalf of EMCI and the Motorola Solutions team, I'd like to thank you for attending this event. Our objective is not to sell anything today. Instead, we want to increase awareness of the powerful technology solutions, many of which are new to the market, available to businesses and institutions. While all operations are unique in many ways, they also share some very common challenges. One of which is the ability to be proactive rather than reactive when mitigating potentially serious events. Security, personal safety, efficiency, and productivity are all common threads that run through every operation. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to explore the most advanced integrated technologies available that can address your immediate needs and provide scalability that allows for future growth. To get us started, I'll turn this over to Nick Bacigalupi, Channel Sales Executive with Motorola Solutions. Take it away, Nick.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank you, all of you, for your time and attending this webinar. We have a profound respect for what you do in keeping your organizations running smoothly and your teams and guests and other patrons safe on a day-to-day basis. So what we're going to do today, like Mike mentioned, is go through some technology that can make you much more proactive instead of reactive. And we're going to go do this in displaying 3 different scenarios, a few scenarios that happen on a day-to-day basis that we've seen at multiple customer locations and organizations across the U.S. And then we'll tackle how some organizations typically respond, and then some ways that we could help automate with the help of this new technology and ensure a faster, more proactive response. So first, I just wanted to remind you that in gratitude for spending some of your valuable time with us today, EMCI has entered you in a raffle for a $100 gift card. The winner will be contacted after the webinar directly by EMCI. And now let's take a quick survey quickly to see which of these scenarios occurs most often at your location. So we have secure area or perimeter breach, a search for a missing person, disruptive individuals on premise, or watch list, basically be on the lookout for a particular vehicle or license plate, right? So this is essentially if you have maybe a be on the lookout for either a violent individual or something like that, right? So we'll give everybody some time to respond, and then we'll go ahead and click on to see some of the answers and which one is the most popular scenario that occurs at your location. Okay, let's take a look here. So we have essentially about a third split with secure area, perimeter breach, disruptive individuals on premise, and watch list, essentially be on the lookout for either license plates, vehicles, or persons. And that's really interesting. All 4 of these actually we're going to cover today in different scenarios. So we'll be able to kind of show you how we can be a little more proactive, and then what technology later on will be able to assist in making you respond to these a little faster and make sure that each one of the technologies can allow you to quickly respond and be more proactive, right? So the first one we're going to tackle here is as a potential scenario for secure area monitoring. Now, a lot of us have secure areas at our facilities in a hospital or healthcare setting. This could be pharmaceuticals or a neonatal intensive care unit. You know, there could be other areas, maybe like a backdoor loading area where you don't want anybody entering that doesn't have clearance. In distribution and manufacturing, a lot of our customers have dangerous areas where people have gotten hurt before, or maybe there's hazardous materials. And then there's also areas that could be sensitive because they have competitive secrets or maybe unreleased products or beta testing going on, right? So those they want to restrict access to as well. In hospitality, I mean, in a variety of different hospitality accounts, you'll have either areas where they, at certain hours, you can't enter or you shouldn't be able to enter. If you think about a pool after hours at a hotel, if you're there at a pool after hours, maybe there's no lifeguard, or maybe there's just potential for somebody to get injured or, God forbid, drown, then at that point, that's a liability for that hotel. So they want to be alerted as soon as possible when somebody is loitering around the pool area after hours, right? So if it's 4 a.m., that's unusual activity, and that's something you want to be alerted about. But if you think of other hospitality accounts like a casino, they have secure areas where cash is involved and different prizes and things. And if you think about in a sporting arena or some type of concert venue, you'll have the actual area where the entertainment's going on or the sporting event, which is obviously restricted. And then also you'll have certain VIP areas. And then in education, obviously you have different areas where you potentially don't want anybody to enter, maybe whether it be in certain doorways or you just want to have one entry into the building. And all these things can be set up as secure areas where you'll be able to restrict access and be alerted as soon as possible, ideally, right? So, but first, let's take a look at how an organization typically would respond to an incident involving a secure area. So we'll review it first from the perspective of the field team, and then also from this perspective of the team behind a video wall or dispatch area. Initially, to detect, basically we're going to go through some of these steps here, and in red, we'll have the manually intensive areas where we feel that we can improve with analytics, right? So the use of analytics can make that a lot more faster to respond and even proactive as opposed to reactive. So you're not researching an incident that occurred, you're stopping an incident. So in this scenario, you'll have a typical response with a security guard completing some rounds or maybe posted at a certain area. And then if they see an intrusion, you're kind of relying on them to see it or be at that moment at that area. And so they might just see maybe an open door and they have to go investigate, right? The same thing at the video wall. A lot of us have so many video cameras to look at, it's hard to focus the attention on a particular one and see that something's occurring. And sometimes, we've been at customer locations that have a person who's monitoring the video wall, but they also have to check people in and back when they come in to make deliveries, and they have multiple different hats that they wear. So that just becomes very, very difficult to basically allow them to constantly monitor the video wall, which is in itself a full-time job and difficult because they'll have hundreds of video cameras. And if we're looking at one and we think something's going on here, but maybe it isn't, it might really be going on in another screen that they're not even paying attention to, right? So there's a high likelihood that they might miss an intrusion, and then they'll be playing kind of a catch-up role and trying to investigate what's going on. So let's say security does eventually detect some type of unusual activity or intrusion, then they'll communicate that back over through the radio for either backup or just for somebody else in the field to come investigate what happened. The response then would be to track down the intruder and intervene, escort them off the property, and then security would then write up an incident management record of what happened, right? Or sometimes that's some leverage to dispatch, and they'll be the ones that write up the incident management. But if we go and take a look at how we can automate this so it's less manually intensive and less prone to error, we'll see that, initially in green here, our technology will be able to alert automatically anything that's unusual activity, or if it's a certain area where let's say you have access control set up and there's a breaking and entering in that area, you'll be able to be alerted immediately, right? And so this would make sure that you no longer have to have a guard at that position to notice that a secure area has been breached. The artificial intelligence would actually alert them immediately, right? And dispatch would also be alerted, and then when they're actually going to respond, the security personnel can even look at their Ion smart radio and see the camera footage to make sure that they're not going in blind. Let's say that suspect has a weapon, or is maybe moved from one area to another. Then they'll be able to see that on the video camera while responding to the incident, and if needed, call for backup or make sure that they go in with the appropriate amount of people and knowledge of the situation. They can then communicate back over their radio for backup as needed, and then the people behind the video wall will be able to track that individual both on fixed and body cams if they have, and you can easily track them based on their facial appearance. It'll be able to lock in on somebody and then go and monitor wherever they appear on the video system. After this, in the response stage, you'll have after security's intervened and either escort them off the property or call the police, they'll be able to then fill out an incident report with any relevant video and data already pre-populated. So this allows them to have less manual intensive work, and really all they have to do is fill in mostly the narrative of what occurred. Now, what we're going to do in this next scenario is just use that previous scenario, but go a little bit further and assume that in the previous scenario there was some sort of property damage, or maybe a broken window or a door, and then that needed to be repaired, especially if you're in, let's say, a hospitality setting. But really any location, you'd want to get these types of problems fixed as soon as possible. We were at a customer location, and it was a nice resort by the beach, and they had an issue with a graffiti, right? It was just, somebody came in from the beach and they did some type of graffiti, and they had a wedding there the next day planned. And so you can imagine how quickly they tried to rectify that situation. And, and because nobody wants a wedding where there's, some type of graffiti in the background or maybe in a certain area, right? So it just so happened to be in that area, and they had to call people over to quickly paint it and all that stuff. But they were scrambling because they hadn't noticed it until just hours before the wedding, right? So that's an area where initially our technology would be able to alert them just when somebody goes and intrudes in an area that's secure, and maybe coming in from either a beach or some back entrance. But also you'll be able to initially create a work order, and we'll kind of walk through some steps. So if the security personnel detects that when they're responding to an incident, they see some type of property damage or maybe a spill or broken glass, something that needs to be corrected by maintenance, they can themselves either create on their smart radio and a work order ticket for it to be already cleaned up, or they could have dispatch go ahead and do that if they don't have access to that software, and then they could use whatever job ticketing software they have, and then the maintenance team can accept that on their smart radio, right? So then they'll be able to quickly respond to that, and dispatch can then fill out any incident report with property destruction data and photos and backup evidence and all that stuff, and then maintenance would be able to clean up whatever mess or fix whatever gate or door or window might be broken and minimize the impact to your day-to-day business. So that was essentially one of the scenarios. Now, Melissa Cavallo, my counterpart in Northern Florida, is going to take us through two other scenarios.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, everybody. So the next scenario we're going to talk about is the missing person. And when we talk about a missing person, we have a few examples. So a missing person could be maybe a lost or confused patient in a hospital. Maybe they're wandering around. They need to be quickly located so they don't harm themselves. Or another example could be maybe a lost child at a large resort or theme park. Parents are looking for them. Time is of the essence that they're found quickly so we can resolve the issue. Or maybe another example would be a student that didn't come home on the school bus that day. We have parents calling into the school trying to find out, where was my son last seen, trying to retrace steps so they can find their child and understand why they didn't get off at the bus stop. So considering these three different examples, we're going to actually do the same thing and walk through what we see as a typical response with a missing person with various types of customers. So the first step in our response is the detection. And that really is when that, and in this case, we'll use the example of a lost child at a theme park or a large resort. So parents enjoying their time at a theme park, they notice that their child is missing, and they try effortlessly to find the child and feel the need they need to engage security, because now at this time, they can't find their missing child and they're frantic, panicking, trying to locate them. So they engage security, and security will ask some detailed information. This is where they're going to analyze the situation with those parents. For example, who are we looking for? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? About what age? What kind of clothes are they wearing? They had a blue shirt and a green hat. Where were they last seen? So parents will say, you know, over in the playground section of the theme park is where the last time we saw him, and we turned our heads for 1 second, he disappeared. So we talked a couple steps here about what security is doing to handle the response. We can also talk about how dispatch is going to take this information and also assist in responding to this situation. So security is going to reach out to dispatch. And again, that could be a dispatcher or maybe somebody monitoring that video wall. And when we think about a large resort, they're monitoring a lot of cameras. There's a lot happening. And unless there's something triggering them to view a certain video, a lot of times that information is just passing through. So in our scenario here with the lost child, security is going to reach out to their video wall manager and explain to them we have a lost child. They're going to tell them it's a boy about 6 years old, 4 feet tall, wearing a blue shirt, green hat. The dispatcher is going to take that information and they're going to go back in their video feed and try to identify, using also that last location. We know he was at the playground at around this time. They're going to take those details and try to go back and backstep into where the child might be located. So moving on, we talk about the communication phase. So security has talked to dispatch. They're having dispatch try to locate on the camera feed that child. They're also going to use the core piece of our communication system. I like to call this our backbone, which is going to be our radio system. This is where they're going to dispatch over radio. Security is going to reach out to all of their other team members to let them know we have a lost child. They're also going to communicate those key details to the other team members, so they're all working hand in hand to try to locate this lost individual. Looking down in our dispatch section, dispatch may also feel the need that it's time to contact law enforcement, so they may pick up their phone and be communicating with law enforcement, as well as communicating on the radio with the local team on site. Which brings us to the last step here, which is once we have all the information, we know what we're looking for, security is going to go out into the theme park and go to that particular playground area or wherever the last known location was and try to find the child. And in this case, it's a happy ending because they locate the child and the situation has been resolved. However, they still need to go back in and write an incident report and document what took place. As Nick mentioned on his last slides, these red dash boxes indicate areas where we feel like we can automate, allowing that process to be a lot quicker, more refined, and having the system work a little harder for you on the back end. So we'll move on to our reimagined scenario. This is where we have that same missing person, but we're going to talk about some of that automation and how it can work for us and work smarter, not harder. So we still have the same situation. We have parents that have lost their child. They've detected that, and they're going to engage security. So security is going to ask those same key details to the parents. They're going to find out what they're wearing and provide that information to their dispatcher who's managing that video wall. Now, the difference here is we're going to use artificial intelligence and have the Avigilon camera system using the ACC software that's going to allow them to take a photo or take those key details and apply facial recognition, which will immediately pull them to the child and where they were last seen. In conjunction, as if they have their incident management report also integrated with their camera system using the Ally Incident Management Reporting System, it will also create an incident at that time. So this is, and the green dash boxes indicate where we can pull in some automation and allow the system to do some of that forensic work for you. So the dispatcher, rather than having to go back, find that video, that particular video camera and research, they're able to do it using software at the touch of a button, and it's just a lot quicker and smoother for the dispatcher. So we then also have our security officer who's going to dispatch and communicate with his team over his two-way radio, but he may also have a fleet of our Ion Smart radios. These radios allow you to be able to also share data and images and video, so there may be a fleet of mixed radios that the officers are able to communicate with. What better would it be to have a photo of the child you're looking for right in the palm of your hand as you're searching around trying to help them locate it. And then finally, they're going to reach out, they're going to search for the child, they'll find the child because we have a happy ending in this scenario. And when they go to write that incident management report and close out the report, a lot of the fields have been pre-filled from the report that was automatically created when the incident was starting to be researched within the camera system. So a lot of this automation just really shows how we can be in these scary types of scenarios, we can be more proactive rather than reactive, doing more with less people so we don't have as many steps, and really just makes the process a lot smoother. So now we're going to talk about that same scenario, but we're going to escalate it a little further. Let's say we didn't have a happy ending and the child was not located, or the missing person at the hospital was not located. We need to escalate this. We need to engage law enforcement. And one of the critical things with dispatch is, I had mentioned in our typical scenario, dispatch is going to pick up the phone, they're going to call 911, and then they're going to also be talking on their two-way radio. So they have both hands communicating not all together seamlessly, and you don't have two teams talking together. So using the AvTech dispatch system, you're able to patch law enforcement and local security team. So they're now working together in tandem to locate the child, really just making it smoother and faster. Additionally, all of that data that was gathered from the local security team can be shared with law enforcement. So we're working smarter and faster to hopefully locate the child as quickly as possible, mitigating the issue. So the third scenario we're going to talk about today is the violent and disruptive individual. And when we talk about these examples, let's say we have an excited fan that runs out on the football field. They're at the Raymond James Stadium, they get excited, and they create a disruptive situation on the field. It needs to be contained immediately, and perhaps that individual will be banned from coming back. Another example would be maybe a fight breaks out at the cafeteria in a high school. We have students fighting, potential risk for endangering themselves as well as others. So obviously an urgent situation that needs to be handled immediately. And then the last example would be an irate or angry person, maybe in a hospital. Maybe they're mentally unstable and we need to contain the situation as quickly as possible so no one gets hurt. So using these examples, we're going to talk again about that typical workflow. And the one thing I want to point out with the disruptive and violent individual, in this situation, it escalates. It goes quickly and it goes from 0 to 100. A lot of times we don't have time to communicate as effectively as we would because it's just happening so fast. And so nobody is coming to us telling us that there's an issue. A lot of times somebody notices there's a problem and then it reacts from there. So in this scenario, that's what you'll see. We're going to use the example of an irate, angry patient at a hospital. So they're mentally unstable and they're coming in making threats to harm themselves as well as others. Let's say the nurse is with this individual in the emergency room and the gentleman is starting to raise his voice, things are escalating, and hopefully security notices the situation that's happening. So at that time, they're going to see there's a situation happening, they're going to communicate if they have time, but mostly they're going to just react. They'll probably engage other security members to help for backup, and then ultimately try to contain the situation. And then as indicated in our last slides, we have the need, especially in a situation like this, to write up that incident, to make sure we capture details of what occurred so there's nobody liable in the future or any of that kind of stuff. We're able to go back and pull details of what happened and how did we handle it. I often find that in these scenarios, many times for training purposes as well, people like to be able to go back and see how did we handle this, where were there gaps, or did we handle it as effectively as we could. A lot of times being able to recollect what went right and what went wrong is really helpful. And that's where I feel like the incident reporting is key in a scenario like this. So now we're going to take this same situation and we're going to talk about that automation that we can potentially build into the system, allowing for a quicker and faster response. So in this situation, we're going to have that same nurse dealing with that angry patient in the emergency room, only she's going to have a body-worn camera that she activates when she starts to feel uncomfortable and there's a situation occurring. So immediately that body-worn camera is capturing the footage of what's occurring. Furthermore, the fixed video system is going to be triggered as well. It's going to be alerted that there's something going on in the emergency room, that it's room number 1, and that they immediately can zone in and all eyes are on that situation so they can respond. Security will also be notified on their smart radio, on their ION smart radio, or even their two-way radio. They can be alerted that there's a situation going on. Body-worn camera, fixed camera footage is all being recorded. We have our incident management report, our ally report already triggered and started in the background for us. So we'll have some of that pre-filled data. We're going to communicate out to security and coordinate our best effort to contain the individual, and then the situation is eventually resolved. The pre-populated fields, the captured body-worn footage, the fixed video footage is so crucial in a situation like this. Because like I mentioned, I often find in these scenarios, we like to look back and see what happened, what went right, what went wrong, and maybe everything was wonderful. And hopefully that's always the case. But we often find there are areas where this worked really well and this didn't, and how do we fill in those gaps? And this exact situation actually happened in my hometown. We had an angry patient come in, and they were mentally unstable. And unfortunately, the emergency room was really busy, and so they didn't have a room for him, and they put his bed close to a nursing station. And when the conversation with the nurses started to escalate, he reached over and grabbed a pair of scissors, and he started threatening to harm himself as well as the nurse. And then he got up on his feet and ran through the emergency room. And in order to contain the individual, they had to do what they had to do. It didn't end well for the patient, but they also discovered by looking back, there were a lot of vulnerabilities built into their system. There were certain areas that didn't record the camera footage, so they couldn't show exactly why they handled it the way they did. Just a lot of details like that it's always good to be proactive, look at your systems, and identify areas where maybe we can make it better. So now in this situation for a be on the lookout, Nick mentioned earlier that maybe we have a situation where we have a banned individual. Now we can use that example with the angry patient. Let's say they escaped the hospital and we don't want them to come back. But I think I want to make it more fun, and we're going to talk about the disruptive fan on the football field. So let's say they go out there and they make a big disruption. We want to put them on a ban list. We want to make sure that they're not able to come back on site. And with our Avigilon analytics, facial recognition, license plate recognition, there's a lot of tools that we have built into that system that can allow us to respond or even identify that that individual is on site before they ever enter the stadium. So with the license plate recognition technology, let's say that individual has approached the parking lot, automatically the dispatcher will be alerted on the video system. It will also automatically alert the security team, so they're all aware that this banned individual is driving onto the parking lot. So now everybody can report on scene right to the gate, and they'll be containing him right at the gate. But we can take it a step further and say, let's say that we don't have his license plate, but we do have a photo of him because we took pictures, we know those details. He was arrested perhaps. Using facial recognition, we're able to identify that individual while they're on campus and immediately contain them. So it really prevents escalation of these situations being more proactive versus reactive when we can use the analytics and the built-in tools from some of these technologies to help us to respond quicker. So with that, we've talked about 3 different scenarios, a lot of different technologies, and we wanted to put out another poll question and talk about what type of solutions are you focused on looking at or discussing further? What's a priority for you to improve upon? Would it be your radio communications? Would it be video solutions, incident management reporting, dispatch, or could it be all of the above? I'll give everybody a minute here to answer this poll question.
And Melissa, just while everybody's answering the poll question, just one example that I recalled when you were going through that previous scenario is, I've been to customer sites. This one was a hospital where they have a book of people that they can allow, to be on the lookout, deny entry book list. And just looking at it, it happened to be that I was there, somebody thought it was a false alarm, but somebody thought that a person looked like somebody that, so he had to flip through, the whole book, and that, that takes a long time, and he had to look to make sure that they're at the right moment. They catch them, they zoom in to the video, they pause it, and they say, "Is that it?" "Oh no, it's not." But that's just manually intensive, research that the analytics can do on their behalf. So the analytics can get them a ping. This person is on the premises, or this license plate, like you mentioned, is on the premises on the parking lot. So before they're even at the doorway, they'll be able to already escort them out of the building, or call the relevant security personnel.
Thanks, Nick. You're absolutely right. And I do hear from our customers that, typically that be on the lookout process is pretty manual. It's either a picture on a bulletin board or a book of people that we hopefully remember shouldn't be on site. And that example could be at a stadium or a school or a hospital, a lot of different places where that could take place. So let's see what the verdict is. So we have a lot of people in the room wanting to hear about video solutions and all of the above. Well, that's exciting. So, one of the opportunities that we have with our EMCI team is we can sit down and talk with you and prioritize what's most important. And the great thing about this technology is you don't have to do a forklift upgrade of your systems. You really can focus in on what's important to you and migrate some of this technology over time. And so we look forward to being able to schedule some time and talk through those things. So with that, we've talked a lot about the examples and intertwine some of the different solutions that are out there that maybe you can take advantage of. Now Nick is going to talk about each of the products and how you may benefit from using them. I'll hand it back to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So yeah, like Melissa mentioned, we're going to take a quick look, an overview really of the different solutions that have been mentioned previously in those three scenarios. We'll start with the solutions that let us detect threats and also analyze them at the same time, right? So some of these are basically the initial triggers that start the whole event, and they're able to detect and analyze threats to your organization, right? So the first step is essentially our cameras by Avigilon. Motorola owns Avigilon. Avigilon has high definition cameras. They have pan, tilt, zoom cameras, infrared cameras, dome, fisheye, license plate recognition, you name it, they have it. World-class cameras. But in addition to that, the key, I think value from Avigilon is the analytics. The ease of searching through AI, as Melissa mentioned before, it's just a lot faster and less manually intensive. Especially if you have to rewind through footage, you can see on a timeline where there was activity, where there was regular activity, where there was some type of analytic event, so unusual activity, and use that AI to proactively also alert us when, let's say, a person on a deny entry list or a license plate that you're on the lookout for is on the video system. Once it's in view of a camera, then it'll automatically alert you. And that makes it a lot more powerful and less reactive and more proactive, as we've mentioned before. In addition to this, the searching features for, in the example where there was a lost child that Melissa mentioned, where you can just search and say, hey, they were wearing a blue polo, dark jeans, and you can go ahead and take a look through the system everywhere where that person was and see the history. And then also if they get into view of one of your cameras again, you'll be alerted automatically. So the analytics is very powerful and one of the key values of Avigilon. But another one that that sometimes gets overlooked is focus of attention. I mentioned before in a scenario where we were talking about secure area monitoring, how somebody can easily be watching so many videos and miss the action that's happening in one box because they're looking at all these other boxes, right? So human attention can only take us so far, and that's where the analytics also help us out with Avigilon's focus of attention. And this feature essentially has a honeycomb design with different hexagons that, depending on the color, mean different things. You go from gray, meaning no motion, so no need to really look at that camera. Blue would be motion detected, but it's usual everyday motion, so nothing to be alarmed about. If it's a light blue interior with a dark blue exterior hexagon, that is an analytic event. So there's something out of the norm. And so you want to just, take a look at that one and see, because it could be unusual activity, after hours activity at, let's say, a pool, like we mentioned before. And then there's the red one, which we all know is an alarm color. So that's the alarm where there's obviously something happening. It could be a facial recognition from somebody that you're on the lookout for, or a license plate hit that you're also on the lookout for. So that would automatically pop up, and they'll be able to see that camera, and it would focus their attention on that particular situation. And then you also have, if the camera turns dark, you'll notice that there's a camera down. So then they could go make sure that they troubleshoot and reset that camera as quickly as possible, so they could still have that viewpoint. So it's a very useful feature, and one that, like I said, sometimes gets overlooked because all the analytics are great at Avigilon. The other thing that's really wonderful is Avigilon's Access Control Manager. So we tie this into Avigilon's control center, and it's able to also send alerts to our radios if there's some type of forced entry or key card use that is denied. So maybe somebody who was a terminated employee tries to use their key card to gain access to a facility that they should no longer have access to. All this can be popped up at the dispatch level, and then we can also write up a workflow that can send that to radios that are nearby so that they can respond. We have a variety of different weapons, vape, and different type of sensors that integrate into the Avigilon. There are third parties that integrate into the Avigilon Control Center. One is the Evolve Concealed Weapons Detection, allowing for easy pass-through without having to empty pockets. It'll detect whether somebody has large knives or weapons on them. The others are, there's Halo Vape Sensor, which also, sometimes there's vape sensing requirements at certain schools. But they could also detect smoking, different chemicals, and also noise fluctuations, right? So where does that come into play? Noise fluctuation can indicate some type of fight has broken out, some type of bullying or yelling, or maybe a crowd of people panicking, right? So any of those situations, you'd want security alerted as soon as possible. And then we've mentioned before, license plate recognition camera. We have actual cameras that are for that use and can be set up easily in points of entry for vehicles so that you're notified as soon as that vehicle is on the premises. So we've kind of covered that and how we can be alerted as soon as possible. And then another one that we covered also was body-worn cameras. I think in my example and a couple of Melissa's examples, we mentioned this. These can be integrated into your Avigilon system and also used in conjunction with the fixed cameras that you have out there. Then that way, when you're responding to an incident, you not only have the fixed camera viewpoint, but you also have the viewpoint of your employee, right? Which is important sometimes, especially if there's some kind of criticism on how they handled the situation. So that way you have that data. We have two different models here. You have one that's a smaller, almost like a little thicker version of a credit card, which you can just turn on whenever necessary. And then you have another one that's about the size of like a speaker microphone that has a longer battery life. So it ensures you have sufficient video evidence from the point of view of your staff and can tie into the Avigilon system as well, right? Now let's take a look quickly at some of the tools that help us communicate these threats out to our team in the field, right? We have Orchestrate, which is essentially what ties it all together. This is a website platform, cloud-based platform that we have that allows us to tie in Avigilon analytic triggers and then have that create an incident automatically, like we mentioned, in incident management, and also the Motorola radios to get alerts, right? So all this is started from Orchestrate, but it's a very easy to use platform. EMCI can help guide you, on how to set this up, but it's something that you could easily have somebody on your team manage. And when you go click on one workflow, you don't necessarily have to pause all the other workflows. If you have, let's say, a be on the lookout and you want to keep that active just in case while you're working on it, and that person's on your campus, you'll still be able to keep that active while you're working on another one that's for, let's say, access control or concealed weapons detection. The other tool is one that's pretty well known. It's our Motor Turbo radios, right? Now, this is a well-known portfolio, but things have changed. We've added a couple of radios that really integrate well with Safety Reimagined and the whole Avigilon and Motor Turbo ecosystem. One of these is the Ion, which we've mentioned and we'll cover next. But the R7 is a recently released radio, just released a few months ago, and customers really like this because it has a larger screen, which is great for those alerts that you're getting on the radios, and also any kind of work order or job ticketing alerts, or maybe there's a type of weather alerts that you have set up coming to your radio system. You'll easily be able to take a look at the screen and see that alert without having to scroll down, and you can see the whole entire alert, see what time it came in and everything. Another neat feature about this radio is that there's a temporary, the last 5 calls, there's a memory set up so that you can play back the last 5 calls. And so if you miss something, for some reason, if somebody stepped out to the restroom, left their radio at the desk or something, but they see a missed call alert, they could go back and hear that transmission again. And then it also has a dual mic, and that dual mic allows for background noise reduction. And that's one of the first radios that we have that uses that, along with the Ion also. And so that noise reduction makes the audio a lot clearer, especially in high noise or outdoor areas. The Ion we've talked about, and you understand that it is an Android-based radio. It's a smart radio. You're able to use it also on Wi-Fi or Verizon, AT&T data LTE. And what's nice about it is that it combines a radio and a smart device. So you'll be able to use this radio and also access any kind of application. So for your data-heavy users, or maybe users that are using a tablet or some other smart device and a radio, you can essentially consolidate those those 2 devices and have them look up any kind of applications that they might be using. Maybe they're scanning certain things. They can scan that with the camera on the back of the Ion. If they're using any applications for work order or incident management, they'll be able to use the same applications as long as they're available on the Google Play Store. And also any kind of video camera for you security personnel out there. We've mentioned how they won't have to go into an area blind. They can actually take a look at the camera footage and see live what's going on so that they can respond effectively or call for backup if needed. And then there's Wave Push-to-Talk. Wave Push-to-Talk is essentially one that is a software that makes it interoperable and allows us to connect multiple devices from, let's say, a cell phone, tablet, a PC, or a 2-way radio, all connected. So you get the right device for the right person, and you're still able to communicate as one unified team. The Ion can run the Wave application natively, so that's very useful in the case that you have somebody that's going from one campus or one facility to another. They'll be able to not just communicate at the radio system of each of those facilities, but they'll be able to communicate through LTE on the road en route to the second facility. So finally, let's review the solutions that help us respond and accurately report any incidents that we come across, right? The first step is AvTech dispatching. AvTech, Melissa mentioned AvTech in one of her scenarios. It is essentially a great dispatching console with interoperability potential for public safety and other disparate systems. You can also patch different groups in case of an emergency. So that really allows you, let's say, you don't want engineering and security really to talk to each other, but maybe there is an issue that requires them to communicate. So you could patch those 2 groups together because you see a need in that, a temporary need in that moment. So you'll patch those 2 groups together, and you could do that from the dispatch area, right? So you'll be able to do that as well as integrate a telephone without needing to pick up the phone, right? You'll be able to already integrate it, and also it could be recorded. So we have recording options that can document the users, the groups, the date and time, and also record the transmission of both the radio calls and telephone interoperability. Ally Incident Management is one that we've mentioned as our incident management platform. It ties in to Avigilon alerts and also alerts the radio system. So it's basically interoperable between them, and they're able to allow you to see different trends. So not only can you report the incidents that go on and essentially have it as a digital filing cabinet where you can upload, relevant video and relevant images. You'll also be able to zoom out and see trends. For example, let's say you have those two locations, one campus, campus A, campus B. And then in campus A, you see that it just happens that on this side of the building, there's always these type of incidents, whether it be, let's say, a graffiti example, or maybe just some property destruction or just loitering, different type of examples, but it always happens in that area. So you'll see basically hot areas in the map, the trend map that you see there. And you'll say, okay, well, in this area, it seems like we need more video cameras, right? Or maybe we need a person patrolling that area in a golf cart, right? It allows you to make informed decisions and have that data to back it up so that you could go to your management team and request the additional funds for that camera, additional radios, additional personnel, whatever it is that you feel you might need. So it just allows you to take a look at the overall trends and make informed decisions about your security and based on the incidents that are occurring. And then also for those of you in education, you'll be able to automatically upload the Clery Act reporting. So it has a Clery Act suite that you'll be able to automatically upload any kind of violent incidences on campus as required by the Department of Education. The other neat things that some of our customers have used Ally for are for essentially workplace injuries. They, just to keep track, not just of incidents that happen security-wise, but also maybe incidents that happen like a slip and fall, or for a customer or patient at a hospital, or maybe it's just a workplace injury that happens at a manufacturing or distribution center. They'll be able to document that, take any relevant images, and fill in the narrative as needed. So later they can refer to that if there's some kind of lawsuit or something. And then there's also lost and found. People have used this for lost and found. There's actually a couple options there for lost and found, for you to be able to input the person. Maybe if you have any kind of video of the person leaving maybe a cell phone behind on a bench on campus, you'll be able to have that video so that they can ID the person. If you have name or any type of contact info, you could put that in there, and as well as serial numbers for device, right? So let's say on the cell phone case, they'll be able to put the serial number of the device and then where it's stored as well. So that way there's always somebody who's keeping track of that in case that the person who found it isn't necessarily there. They'll be able to have that recorded so that whenever that person comes back for that item, they'll be able to be verified as the user of that item. The other neat thing that we have in our response solutions is Command Central Aware. Now, Command Central Aware ties in multiple solutions into one pane of glass, essentially. You can have your video, your GPS positioning of your radios, and also the positioning of your fixed cameras, all on one map and one pane of glass. And then it also allows you to pull in AvTech dispatching, right? So it makes it a lot easier, especially as we mentioned, people are doing, a lot of things sometimes and being called to do multiple things at the workplace. We're all doing more with less. So what we need to do is just make it more efficient. And having this all in one pane of glass really makes it a lot more efficient for them. And they're able to see video, dispatching, and GPS and indoor positioning all in one software suite. And then there's third-party software, right? Motorola partners on our radio side with multiple third parties to integrate various alarms, sirens, sensors, applications into our ecosystem and provide radio alerts. The other thing we are starting to do now is do this on the Android side, right? So we have two Android devices, the Ion, which is Android and radio, and then the Evolve, which is just an Android device. And we're partnering with different app developers for Ion to see if we have some integration with our programmable buttons as well. So we're always looking at different options to be able to make things a lot more valuable for our customers and make sense and make them more efficient and increase safety, right? So we can do this with, like I mentioned, different alarms. It could be a panic alarm, and in some areas throughout the country, hospitality accounts need to have housekeeping staff need to have panic alarms, right? And they could do this with an emergency button on a radio. But in the case that they don't have radios that have emergency buttons, so let's say they're, with our 3000 series, or they just don't want to keep the radio on them all the time, or they just want a big panic button that they could have on their cart, they can do this as well. And we can work with different, whether it's tablet media, Teldio, different providers of third-party software to provide that middleware to automatically send alerts to the radio. So that was essentially a review of all our solutions. We've reviewed today what Motorola calls the Safety Reimagined ecosystem. And it's pretty much, we went through the detect and analyze phase, what solutions can help us detect threats and analyze them. And then we've gone through the communicate phase, which is essentially the tools that we use to communicate that out to the field, right? Because that's how we actually go and respond. And then once we respond, we're able to make sure with some software that we're responding and keeping track of those threats in a way that makes sense, so that we can either have a report generated and then look at those trends, or make sure that we get the relevant personnel involved, that for some reason there has to be a police dispatch called, right? So, or some type of integration with job ticketing software. So all these make it a lot more efficient, and putting these all together is something that we leverage our partner, EMCI. So it's your local radio and video partner for Motorola and Avigilon. And EMCI, even though we covered a lot, just remember that it's all scalable, and EMCI can help guide you through that process, right? It's important to work with your rep to make sure that you're placing the right pieces in play to get you where you want to be 2 to 3 years from now. Not so much, think that you have to bite it all at one piece, right? This is a lot of different sections of our portfolio. Motorola has grown from just being, radio manufacturer to video data solutions and software, right? So it's things where you could put the right pieces in place and just have a roadmap, and that way you're making sure that everything that you're putting together can be interoperable in one ecosystem. So at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a pop-up that allows you to set some time to discuss how we can help with your specific needs at your organizations. Right now, we probably have some time for some question and answer. We have a couple of questions in here. Melissa, I don't know if you wanted to just read maybe 2 or 3 of the questions to me, and then we can answer them.
Sure. And thanks, Nick, for going over those solutions. There's a lot to offer, a lot of opportunity. This first question that came up seemed pretty appropriate with what we're talking about. So the question is, with all of this technology, what are customers typically starting with when they're doing these upgrades to their systems?
A lot of times they start with whatever's oldest to trade out, right? 'Cause sometimes that's what they could justify getting the budget for. I'm sure you've seen where, we have some customers that are looking at video, and they just have old cameras, analog cameras maybe, and they just need to get rid of that, or in some of the scenarios that you mentioned, they might see some vulnerabilities in their video system, so they feel like that is something they need to address as soon as possible. But in other cases, there's radio systems that, out there that still have analog radios, right? And so they have to take those first steps to migrate to digital, and they come to us making sure that they are migrating in the right path. Hey, what have other customers done? They ask, what have other, whether it's a hospital or university, they'll say, hey, what is everybody else using? What do you recommend? What new technologies out there? And that's where we can sit and take some time to discuss this whole ecosystem and make sure that we start at the point that is the most vulnerable for them currently. So in answer to your question, there is no right answer. You can start wherever each individual customer needs.
Awesome. And I think you're right, Nick. I think the key is that we help them prioritize where that need is first and what's the oldest technology. I think that's spot on. The next question that we have here was, I just purchased a new camera system. Can my camera system, if it's not a Avigilon, do some of this technology? So,
Avigilon is interoperable with certain other camera hardware. So that would be one where I believe we'd have to get with EMCI and make sure we take a look at what that end user has. Avigilon is compatible with other on-VIF camera manufacturers, and the key is the analytics, like I mentioned before, is what triggers these alerts, right? So you want to make sure that you have compatible cameras, even if they're other manufacturers. Maybe you mix in Avigilon as you need, but the key thing is the analytics server, right? So once you have the analytics server, you're then able to have a Avigilon Control Center, which is what connects to Orchestrate and sends the radio alerts, back and forth, right? So, we'll follow up with them to make sure that we can meet their specific needs and kind of see what cameras solution they currently have.
Spot on, Nick. I think that's where, again, that meeting with you guys is key, where we can talk through some of these details and see what current investments you've already made it that we can enhance with some of these newer technologies. Sometimes it's not a rip and replace. Sometimes there's just some simple upgrades that we can do to allow you to take advantage of these newer systems. So Nick, with that, that's our last question for today. I think this was a great webinar, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to meet with us. Nick, I think you did say there was a pop-up at the end.
Yes, there's going to be a pop-up, essentially just asking you if you want to set some time with your local EMCI rep, right? So just feel free to enter any information. And for those of you that have sent some questions in that we didn't get to answer, we'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. But thank you very much. Appreciate your time again, and just thank you. I encourage you to reach out to EMCI and discuss your needs, because everybody's needs are a little bit different, and you'll all have different starting points. But the idea is we'll get you to where you want to be a few years from now, right? So thank you again, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.